Hey, what's up? My name is Nate, and welcome to another mini Bible lesson. For lesson 30, we're continuing through the Old Testament with the book of 1 Samuel. Up to this point, the nation of Israel was released from slavery in Egypt, led through the wilderness to Sinai to make a covenant with God, before finally entering the land that God promised them. But even in the promised land, Israel went through years of turmoil and chaos. God raised up leaders called judges to save Israel from warring nations, as well as to help spiritually guide Israel, reminding them how to follow God. The end of the book of Judges sums up the experience by saying, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes." Israel needed consistent and strong leadership, and the book of Samuel offers a solution to the problem. The story focuses on three main characters: the prophet Samuel, King Saul, and King David. Together, they transition Israel from being 12 tribes to a unified kingdom ruled by King David in Jerusalem. This story is played out through 1 and 2 Samuel. The first book is easily divided into three parts. The first part is connected to the chaos of the era of the judges. We're introduced to a grieving woman named Hannah. She's grieved because she's unable to have children, but by God's grace, she gives birth to a son named Samuel. Out of her joy, she sings a song, which is found in chapter 2. And the big idea of Hannah's song is that God opposes the proud and he raises up the humble and the lowly by his power. This is a principle repeated all throughout Scripture, and it's certainly not unique to this book, but it's one of the main guiding principles in this story of both King Saul and King David's lives. In these first 7 chapters, God calls Samuel to be a great leader and prophet for his people. Like the judges before him, Samuel delivers Israel from the Philistines and points the nation of Israel back to God. In chapter 8, Samuel is at the end of his life and Israel asks to have a king. Samuel consults with God and God says, "Give them a king." And it's here we're introduced to Saul. Saul is a deeply flawed man, though he has so much promise as a king. We find that he's dishonest, lacks integrity, and is ultimately prideful. Saul even goes as far as to disqualify himself by disobeying God. He's confronted by Samuel, which begins Saul's downfall as Israel's king. Samuel reminds the people of Israel that they need a humble king because God opposes the proud and lifts up the humble. Samuel informs Saul that God will replace him, and God has already been at work in raising up a new king. In chapter 16, we're introduced to David, who is the least likely candidate for a king. And that's where we're going to pick up our story in our next lesson. I hope this video has been helpful to you. Thanks for watching.